Good morning, everyone. This is John with Gun.Deals. Today we are going to be talking about the Vortex Razor HD Gen 3 1:10 first focal plane LPVO. It's probably the best optic for a few people, but probably not for you. With an MSRP of nearly $4,000 and just about every feature that is currently known to man, can it do everything? But before we get into that, go ahead and hit the like button and comment literally anything down below. Full disclosure, this optic was sent in to me for review by a kind viewer of the channel, no affiliation with Vortex for this review. Getting into basics, we of course have a 1:10 first focal plane LPVO, 34mm main tube giving us a 28mm objective, capped windage and elevation, locking illuminator wheel on the left with a super bright diffractivenator illumination, which we'll talk about later. Moving back, we have a 3D printed throw lever on the super light 1:10 throw on the magnification ring, and of course a diopter at the back. Size and weight is pretty good for the feature set, roughly 10 inches long and 22-ish ounces isn't too bad for what we're getting. On paper, everything looks pretty good. But here's where things get funky. Now let's talk about usability. On the 1X, the eye relief is extremely long, like 5 to 6 inches. But oddly enough, it's not very forgiving if you're too close to the optic. Usually I can run my stock only 2 or 3 clicks out as a shorter guy and get away with it, but with the Razor mounted as the owner has it set up here, I need to have the stock all the way out to get a full 1X image. I've seen people mount these very far forward because again, that 1X eye relief is very long. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't mean that the 1X itself is good. In fact, it's kind of bad. It's extremely warpy and fisheyed and doesn't really come close to a true 1X like other LPVOs can. No LPVO is really 1X, but the Razor HD Gen 3 isn't even close. Now, is that super important? No, not really. You put the fiery dot on the target and pull the trigger. But if you ever slow down and just look at the glass, the image isn't great, or at least the way it's presented. The clarity, the brightness, and the colors look great, it's just the warp filter applied to the whole image, making it look worse than it should. Moving up the magnification to that 10x top end, the eye relief does tighten up to about 4 inches. Now, I do think there is some magic happening here because I never really noticed the tight eye box. It is tight, of course, it's a 1:10 LPVO, but I never really noticed it when shooting from distances out to 600 yards, and as we'll get into later, this optic has a 1X, but it's not really designed for that. Field of view is rated at 115 feet at 1X at 100 yards, which is in the pretty good category for an LPVO. I think most people will like the extra eye relief and the relatively forgiving eye box, but the 1X is just kind of bad. Before we get to the glass performance at 10x, let's talk about the reticle. You have two options, the Enhanced Battle Reticle 9 in either a MOA-based BDC or a mill grid option. I usually prefer mills for the most part, but here we have the BDC, which worked great. In the top of the glass, we have some height and width auto-ranging features. In the center of the reticle, we have our floating dot and segmented circle. That is the only part that gets illuminated with their special illumination tech, and it gets very, very bright. More bright than any other LPVO on the market, not named the Attacker, and even then I don't know which is brighter. The way that they're able to achieve this brightness is through the use of a fireball spell cast by the electric spirit trapped inside the 2032 battery. They call this spell diffractive illumination or something like that. It's extremely bright, but a quirk of the system is that it's only bright when directly behind the optic. If you're a little off center, left, right, up, or down, the brightness drops very quickly. That's just a quirk of how the system works. It's really not that big of a deal at 1X with a very forgiving eye box, and at 10X it is tighter of course, but you're also probably a little bit more stable at 10X. Another trick of the center segmented circle is that it's also translucent, so you can actually see through it, which is kind of cool. I think in some situations that can be useful, but obviously those features come at a very high price. So think about a high occlusion target where you might be at a relatively close range, say between 100 and 200 yards, and you want to see a little more. That translucent reticle is of course going to be a little bit less obtrusive than if it were solid. The rest of the BDC is laid out in 50-yard drop increments and also includes 5, 10, 15, and 20-mile-an-hour winds at the 100-yard marks, which are extremely useful at over 500 yards here in windy South Dakota. Now this was used on a Geisley 14.5 upper, and for that and 55 grain M193, the BDC lined up okay. Each BDC needs to be calibrated for your barrel length and ammo combo. They're not just going to work perfectly out of the box if you don't follow instructions. I think the reticle is good, and for a competition shooter, I think the BDC can make sense if all of your comps are, say, 600 to 650 yards and in. If you really want to have this on more of an SPR rifle with, say, an 800 yard quick and consistent capabilities, I would recommend the mill reticle or another optic entirely. Now, getting to the glass at 10x, it's just okay, but certainly nothing special. In the low light, it was a little rough at about 550 yards. The clarity wasn't quite great. Again, low light environment, but the light transmission is not fantastic at 10x. Now, the owner loves 3D printed gizmos, anti-reflection devices, scope caps, throw lever, the scrim to hide the outline, top mounted dot, plus the rifle is set up for literally everything, clip-on thermal in front of the Vortex, which does work on lower magnifications, laser speed M6TR up front with a Surefire Vampire. This thing is set up for literally everything, but that means it's not really good at any one thing. The problem with most LPVOs is that they have fixed parallax, so even the best glass at extended distances isn't going to look the best. The parallax on the Razor is set at 150 yards, which is a little further than most LPVOs, but I imagine that is to hedge their bets towards more distance shooting. But even so, the glass at max magnification is only okay, but certainly not a looker. Almost any cheap 2-10 MPVO will look better at distance than the Razor Gen 3, so if you're looking for the best mid-range performance possible, this ain't it. I know some people who compete with these, and despite all the downsides, they don't really care. The combination of magnification, reticle features, illumination means that they can be incredibly quick and effective inside that 650 yard window or further with the mill reticle. Now, cost also doesn't matter much for a competitive shooter. You're going to buy whatever helps you win. If you're on a budget, you probably aren't competing at the highest level. But if you're not that guy, and if you're anyway budget conscious like I am, then there are other options that will perform better in a lot of ways for a lot less. If you're looking for mid-range precision, an MPVO with a top dot will be more help for you. If you're looking for something that can't quite do everything, but it's very good up close, there are other options. Even the older Razor HD is going to do most of the things that this optic can do for about 1/2 the money, sacrificing a little bit at that top end. I don't think this is an optic that I would ever personally want to buy, but I get why it exists, and I think there is a market there for it, for kind of a top tier LPVO with some funky performance at 1x. But with all that out of the way, guys, let me know what you think of the Vortex Razor HD Gen 3 1-10 first focal plane LPVO. And with all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.